All right, everybody, welcome back to the Africa Summit. We're going to kick off the first of the full-blown private sector CEO panels. You're in for a super treat when you hear about the innovation and ideas and power of the group before you. It's going to be fascinating. And I know it's getting toward dinner time, but if we can keep the conversation hushed, especially up toward the front of the room, so we get a good production quality so these gentlemen could share their message cleanly, that'd be great. I'm going to kick it off because I'm losing my voice, and then I'm going to go cough out in the hallway. But I'm going to turn it over to a multi-talented friend of mine, R.J. Gosselin. He's an Episcopal bishop. He can tell you about the size and scope of that work, but he's also a world-class CEO that works with a bunch of CEOs, world-class CEOs up on a panel with us today. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us at Liberty University. RJ, take it away. You bet. Thanks.
David. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about leveraging technology to drive innovation in emerging markets. Let me take a moment to introduce the three members of the panel with me. First is Dr. Newton Howard. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Nito. He's developing a revolutionary brain-computer interface that is the size of a grain of rice. And it's among one of his many accomplishments. He invented the technology for Google Earth and Google Translate. He was the visionary architect of Skype, Wi-Fi, and LANs. So some of these things you may have heard about or you might be using. He is the director of research labs at Georgetown, Oxford, and MIT. He served in the U.S. military as a scientist for over 11 years. He's the founder of the Center for Advanced Defensive Studies and originator of over 60 patents relating to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and general information technology. So we're glad to have Dr. Howard with us. To his right is Ricky Kaplan. Ricky's the chairman of the Kaplan Family Offices. We invest in early stage technology companies with a potential return of 100x. It's a technology-focused investment team with technologists, entrepreneurs, and former CEOs. Ricky is a globally recognized leading entrepreneur who's launched and led multiple organizations, including the HCI Group, which is one of the largest global healthcare IT consulting firms in the world. Following a March 2017 merger with Tech Mahindra, the HCI Group, he's now global CEO for healthcare and life science at Tech Mahindra, which is a global technology company with about 117,000 plus employees worldwide. And Mahindra is a $22 billion in revenue operation. He's the recipient of numerous awards. We could be here for a half hour listing them. We're pleased to have Ricky with us. And to his right is Archie Ravishankar. He's the founder and CEO of Cogni, which is one of only 10 fully digital banks in the United States. It's one of the top banking platforms, and he's also been instrumental in successfully steering Cogni's global expansion into Asia and working to provide retail access to private market securities. This is a very interesting platform. I'm going to have him talk about it a little bit, but it's providing banking, credit, and commerce all in a single application, which is a unique application. The New York Times World Review named him as one of the top 100 global thought leaders in banking and finance. He's a member of the Forbes Finance Council. His background is in law and economics. Born in India, grew up in Australia, and was introduced to his wife by the Maharaji of Jaipur while representing Australia in international polo. So that's a pretty amazing. I'm Dr. R.J. Gosselin. For more than 30 years, I've been involved in helping companies develop and implement strategies to meet a broad range of goals. I've worked with everything from small to medium-sized enterprises up to Fortune 50 companies. Formerly Chief Executive Officer of the Catalyst Group, which was managing a group of companies based out of Israel, doing strategic projects on 5 continents with global law firms, consulting to governments, international banks, global television networks, and multinational NGOs. As Dave mentioned, not only am I the Managing Director of the Kaplan Family Office, I'm an Archbishop and the General Secretary of CEEC. We're operating in several nations in Africa, by the way, including Kenya, Burundi, South Sudan, DRC, Uganda, and growing all the time. So our format idea this afternoon is to spend about 40 to 45 minutes discussing issues and insights from the panel, and then opening the last part of the discussion to questions and answers from the participants here at Liberty University. So let me go ahead and begin by just discussing or presenting our concept, which is basically leveraging education, innovation, adoption, and finance. So Ricky, may I begin with you? You were mentioning not too long ago, you had some discussions with Anand Mahindra and Mukesh Ambani relating some of the technology challenges they addressed in India. How do you see those corresponding to new technology challenges in Africa and concepts that could be carried over?
Thanks, RJ. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. I think I spoke with a few of you earlier. There's a conversation I had about a year and a half ago where Anand Mahindra, who, for those of you who don't know him, he's the chairman of the Mahindra organization, and just a tremendous philanthropist in India, brought his good colleague, Mukesh Ambani, to speak with me. Mukesh is the CEO of the Reliance Group. I believe he's the wealthiest man in India, and he's a visionary. Both of them are. And they shared a couple of thoughts with me. One is the Indian economy was going to grow from $3 trillion to $10 trillion within the next 8 to 10 years. Two was there's going to be a significant shortage in technology resources, specifically engineering. He said that we're going to need 150 million engineers globally, and he wanted half of those to come from India. And so as I thought about it, I'm like, you know, India's done a good job with this, but we're going to need a lot more than what Asia can do. In Africa, being an emerging economy, hearing some of the things and some of the technology platforms and education happening, I thought this would be a good idea. And he talked also a little bit about connectivity, right? For those of you who don't know the story of Jio in India, Mukesh Ambani created basically a tower connectivity to give Wi-Fi to the entire country. So all of a sudden, nobody had cellular, nobody needed cellular, and everybody could pay as they go for a few rupees and have connectivity. And so it was an opportunity to save a tremendous amount of money and get technology, which then you can get education in the hands of a lot of people, and you can create a lot of platforms. And so as I thought about this conversation, I kept thinking, why not Africa? And what's great is there's technology that is so much further advanced than even then that you can leapfrog expensive infrastructure. I want to give one more example that actually happened a few days ago and all the way up to yesterday. And it's a great example of why we really need to think strategically about what the emerging technologies are. I had dinner with a gentleman named Francis Suarez on Saturday night, who is the mayor of Miami. In South Florida, and he's kind of known as a tech mayor. He's recruiting a bunch of tech companies to Florida, and one of the things he shared with me, he just spent some time with Elon Musk and Steve, the CEO of the Boring Company, and they won an RFP in Las Vegas to basically put the new tunnel systems in using some emerging technology, and he told me their bid was $44 million. The next closest bid was over $1 billion to build that tunnel system. In New York City alone, it cost $3.5 billion per mile. So this is innovative technology. And what's interesting, I called up the mayor of the city I live in Jacksonville, and said, "Do you know about this?" No clue. I talked to the CTO or CEO of our transportation authority. They happen to be passing a 1 penny sales tax that would raise $1 billion in tax revenue. They were about to spend $350 million on building out an ancient monorail. And they're sitting here not even realizing what technology exists in the United States today. And so I think when you have a white canvas at a lot of these countries, there's tremendous opportunities. And I'm privileged to be sitting next to two of my business partners and good friends, Archie and Newton, who are going to talk a little bit about that. But when it comes to disruptive technology, these are two great examples. I'm sure they're going to have some great ideas too. Thanks, RJ.
Thank you, Ricky. Newton, I'm going to jump to you for a minute if I can, because I wanted you to take a few minutes and talk about NITO and talk about the development of this disruptive technology and how technology can completely change the approach to solving problems. Because I think NITO is a great story and it's worth listening to.
So NITO stands for Ni2O, neurons input-output. And it's basically the intersection of brain-computer interface as we hear about it, and DPS, deep brain stimulation, which is the last line of defense for neurodegenerative disorders. The innovation itself stems from looking at nature and inspiring how nature solves its problems. So we came up with an innovation known as the Kiwi chip that is about the size of a grain of rice and gets implanted in an area that needs solution. In the case of Parkinson, that happens to be an area called STN, or subthalamic nucleus. The initial use of that is that it solves a lot of the problems that we have with neurodegenerative disorder. The biggest epidemic, greater than COVID as we know it, is Parkinson, Alzheimer. The fact that the neurons degenerate and our brain moves to atrophy if we actually don't take care of brain health, which is not something that is taken with the appropriate attention. Technology like this can be done easily in countries in Africa and other places, and lead the innovation of that and bring it forward here, as they don't have the restrictions that we have, and they have the human resources. The actual true gold is the human resources. I remember when I was in Michigan, this young lad from I'm blanking on the country, but it's one of the African nations, and he was the best programmer in Java that I ever met to date. So just imagine if you cluster a whole bunch of these guys together and get them to have fun coding from remote. So that's enough about NITO. We can answer more as they come.
Well, thank you, Newton. Archie, I mentioned in the introduction that you were already being successful in doing a global expansion for Cogni into Asia. Could you take a few minutes to talk about Cogni and its unique application of the different elements you bring together in that platform? And then I'll have a follow-up question for you about some other expansion as well.
Sure, thank you. So Cogni means cognitive, right? In the last 20 years, we lived in the information age, where we've been connecting everybody. So social media companies had a very important role to play. That also led to a lot of problems. Data ownership, identity, authenticity. The next 20 years is going to be a knowledge-based age. So we're moving away from an information age to a knowledge-based age. So the platform, being social media and the information age, is going to shift to payments and banking as a platform. And then every other lifestyle services would be sitting on top. So what Cogni is looking to do is provide a digital banking ecosystem on top of which all lifestyle services could sit a lot more efficiently. Now, you might ask, well, these things already exist in silos. Why do we have to bunch them all together? I'll tell you why. Now, in America, there's about 180 million Americans who have very thin credit file. An average American is short of $400. And while if you have a lot of money in your bank account, you have a private client manager who tends to know everything about you, wants, likes, preferences, goals, and aspirations, and you get very tailor-made financial products, and you're eligible for one. But if you don't have a lot of money in your bank account, right, banks don't give you the time of the day, but you would still spend your money. The disposable income in America is about $700 billion today, and is expected to reach over $1.3 trillion in the next few years. Now, that discretionary spend is typically owned by social media companies, advertisements. So what happens is if you want to sell a product to a consumer, you have to pay to Facebook, Google, and Instagram for advertisement for discovery. The discovery cost anywhere between from $1 all the way to $15 based on the product that you're trying to sell, right? And so that distribution cost is very expensive, and the conversions are pretty bad. We are trying to disrupt that distribution and trying to bring it back to the source. Now, what happens here when you disrupt the distribution, the money that these companies spend on advertising could be used to subsidize the products and services of consumers. So that's exactly what we're trying to do, making those products and services a lot more cheaper for these consumers, and for the consumers to access those products and services. In addition to that, if they don't have the cash to buy, provide them credit at 0% interest paid back in few installments. To do that, obviously, the FICO score is a very old scoring system because our lifestyles have fundamentally changed. People don't have 9-to-5 jobs. People work for 2 months and then they take a break for 2 more months, and there's a job hopping and freelancing work. How could you lend money to somebody who doesn't have a 9-to-5 job? A FICO score potentially does not support the new way of living. So we look at unique data sets, such as your financial data is essentially your DNA. So we look at your KYC data, the geolocation, and the transactional data, connect them with other publicly available data sets, and trying to understand who you are as a person. In addition to that, you are judged based on your financial behavior and not by the bank balance in your account. So if you're a good actor, even if you have $100 in your bank account, you don't have unnecessary chargebacks, you don't do disputes and stuff, we give you good grading. So for example, if your mobile phone is registered under your name, you get a good score. If your mobile phone is registered under your dad's name, then you might probably go few scores lower. So we look at other alternate data sets to analyze what is an eligible amount that we could actually provide for you, and also give you the flexibility to repay that money. So good actors are reported, and then if you're a bad actor, we give them an extra few more weeks to see if we could bring them up to task to get their accounts back to normal. So from a platform standpoint, we look at banking and financial services as basic human rights, and also access to products and services in a lot more efficient, cheaper fashion is a lot more important than social media companies playing an intermediary. So that's how we are looking to solve the problem. So as a whole, we are actually building complex systems by looking at various data sets to serve the consumers a lot better and creating a new distribution for product, service, and content. That's what we're doing.
Great. I want to follow up and kind of keep on the Cogni platform questions for a second, Archie. I had mentioned in your introduction the expansion to Asia. While we were coming up here, you mentioned there's interest from some other countries in some of the Balkan nations. What are the lessons you're learning in Asia and in Europe and EU that can be applied to expanding this financial model into the nations of Africa?
Right. Since you brought up this topic, I mean, with Asia is a different market. So the country that we've been discussing with is Korea. Unlike in the United States, an average Korean saves about $500. And the financial products that they get in Korea are not very high returns bearing. So an opportunity came up for us to provide private market securities. So for example, we have SpaceX and other privately held companies, right, which are very attractive asset classes. We wanted to see how could we democratize that access to those private market securities in Asian countries, which are very friendly to the United States. So we are working on a project with one of my large investors to see how best we could provide access to private market securities in Korea for American companies, clearing a very clear pathway for transfer of funds and access to Koreans to acquire those very attractive asset classes, which is typically accessible only for the wealthy people. In Europe, it's a bit of a different ecosystem out there because if you look at north of Europe, it's a cashless society. Anything below Europe is a cash society. And people are fundamentally different from England to Central Europe. And the relationship with Cogni and Europe is we had a deputy prime minister of a Balkan state who reached out to us and said, well, we've been dealing with cash for a very long time, and then COVID hit, and we didn't have the infrastructure to actually support digital payments and also provide commerce services. So we started interacting with them to see how could we enable Cogni in one of those Balkan states. And when myself and Ricky had the first call, within 2 days, she ended up speaking to another counterpart in another country and said, maybe we could also implement that in another country as well. So for us, that opportunity is very, very unique. And from a company perspective, we very much understand that cultures are very different, needs of the people are very different. So our expansion would be basically working with the local partner. We don't want to have a 51% stake in any of those foreign entities. We might stay with 49%. make sure we provide the technology, we support, and see how we could localize with the partners and bring the partners with us as we start expanding and creating a global financial inclusion system that is a lot more transparent.
If I can just follow up on that, the technology platform is already one of the leading ones in the U.S. We could easily take that to any African country. And as you think about it, Archie's firm is revolutionizing the new credit score. And so you could have Africans that would all of a sudden have a credit score that could be recognized in the U.S. based upon their spending trends. And just to reiterate what he said, we don't want to control. We want local partners that know the local politics, that we want whatever the central bank is, we want them to own it, and we will bring them the platform and help them be successful. So that was an idea that we had while we were brainstorming about some ideas for Africa.
And of course, since we've got the creator of the technology behind Google Translate on the team, in different languages ought not be an issue. Ricky, you've been doing international business for so long. I mean, you're literally a global entrepreneur. Can you talk to us a bit about some of the lessons you've learned from developing markets in international business?
Yeah. So I actually the most I've learned has been in the past few years since I sold my company to Tech Mahindra. I built a consulting company. 90% of our revenue was in the United States. We had revenue in Europe and some other emerging markets. And I did the opposite of what I'm going to propose for African countries. I built a company here, and then I figured out how to sell IT outsourcing and to get their employees to do the work that we were doing here. And what I realized is the market potential is significant. You have in India alone 6 companies that do multi-billion-dollar revenues of just doing technology outsourcing and business process outsourcing. And then if you add in Accenture and Deloitte and IBM and all these others, it's much, 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 much more. What I don't see is I see very limited footprints in Africa and this huge supply and demand gap. And so what I'm interested in, and there's a couple of people I've spoken to already, is how can we identify the emerging technologies? We can go to our friends in Silicon Valley and other large corporations, find out what needs, and maybe even get some contracts lined up. And when you look at the Black Lives Matters issues and the social economic issues in the United States today, I feel like it would be really well received to say, hey, we're going to go and create prosperous technology jobs in Africa, and what you're currently thinking about outsourcing, hey, we've got these wonderful countries that we're developing, and I just think it would really resonate. So this is an idea that's kind of a dream of mine that's starting to take place. So would love to talk to people who want to invest in the right technologies. We can help you put the clients together. There may be joint venture opportunities, but this is just one idea.
Do you want to expand a little bit on the type of skill sets that would need to be developed, say, in an African nation to provide a good BPO opportunity or a tech outsourcing opportunity?
So there's 2 things. One is if you're in a customer-facing role, you need to be able to speak English. And obviously there's some countries in Africa that do. Everyone I've spoken to so far today probably speaks better English than I do, and that's something that can be taught. From a technology perspective, you don't necessarily have to be able to speak English if you're doing coding and things like that. And Newton and Archie, you could talk better about some of the codes that are coding languages that they'd need to focus on. But there's a lot of programs. I know Liberty University teaches it. So and what's great too is you can do joint ventures with an organization like this or others. You can have remote professors. I mean, today you've got like Stanford and NYU college students teaching kids technology and gaming and robotics. There's a company called ID Tech. I can get my 6-year-old kid to take online lessons and stuff like that. So you could easily build a scalable model that doesn't cost too much, bring world-class education right to Africa, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people willing to invest in that.
Great.
Newton, did you have some ideas on the actual coding language?
Fundamental science and math.
That's
Right. When we're talking about the foundation of education and utilizing technology to enhance education, we're speaking on a focus of what we're calling SMART training, which is science, math, general academic skills, reading skills, and technology integrated together. SMART training. that provides the foundational basis for them to be able to move into some of these business process operations and technology operations that can really generate ongoing significant incomes that are generated within their African nations, their local nations. The funds stay in their local community and impact the community as a whole. I want to come back to you again, Newton, and ask about future vision. I mean, one of the things that you've demonstrated throughout your career is that you are a visionary. You see things fitting together in ways that others haven't or haven't yet. And I'm just curious, as you're looking at the situation in Africa and the state of technology today, what is it that's coming to your mind? What do you see as critical potential breakthroughs and opportunities in Africa?
I think every place offers an inspiration to model the natural creation in that environment. And then sometimes what steps out is the anomaly of the things that are causing a challenge or the unnatural flow. So when you look in these areas, you start seeing the things that you need to innovate and correct. For example, the concept, what is known today as the VoIP, voice over IP, was this broad classification from all kind of things over net meeting. I remember years ago when we were working on that, it was Ford, Cornell, and a few other places. We had to look at how you can co-locate a human. So to save on human capital and all the flights in Ford Motor ecosystem, we decided to actually have the person show up on the screen. But it was 24 frames per second, which was a huge thing. And looking at the future, I spoke to this gentleman that was in charge of the Ford Skylab back then, and I said, you know, this could actually be the disruptive thing for communication. He said, we make cars. Go give that to the guys that you're working with at Explorer Group. That was like a few guys at Microsoft that became that meeting. Well, he missed out. The whole thing became Skype and all these other opportunities later. You just have to see the future and essentially transport yourself into that time and enjoy it, and then it comes as a natural flow. It doesn't matter if you're in Africa and Asia and North Pole, as long as you can imagine something better than where you're at, then you can innovate.
Newton, what are some ideas for Africa? I know when you were in the CIA, you created a technology that we call FireChat that basically took everyone's phones and created a Bluetooth mesh network so everyone could communicate without connectivity from Wi-Fi or cellular. As you're thinking of a lot of countries that don't have connectivity, do you have any ideas? What does the future look like?
Right, so in Africa, the communication infrastructure at some point in time was far better than what we have in the US because they jumped ahead of everybody else and had the latest type of wireless platforms. If you leap further than that, you can actually see that you can set up infrastructure in Africa faster than you can do it in the US. For example, using the tunnel system that you're talking about, there it's pristine land underground or underwater. If you establish this type of transportation, then you build new cities. The train gets laid, cities built around it and forged around it by its own nature. It's a phenomenon. People like to be around transportation. So one of the biggest difficulty, I guess, in Africa today is probably transportation. As I see it in Bangladesh, the biggest thing was traffic. So,
transportation really is key because it provides the ability to bring resources in, and the things that are developed, even locally grown agriculture, which is one of the other elements we've been discussing, bring them out to market. But I want to push a little bit deeper with this whole question that Ricky brought up with FireChat. And can you describe how this mesh network works. I mean, it's been utilized already in a couple of very interesting situations you may want to mention. But specifically, I'd like you to talk about how it may allow African nations to leapfrog over the infrastructure development just utilizing smartphones.
Right. So during the Arab Spring, which everybody knows about, the most important thing was to be able to circumvent their government shutting down their communication and their ability to coordinate and organize their movement. It turns out that in actual mobile device, the natural mobile device that we have, is the ability to backgate it, to have it communicate in a short range from a device to device, creating a fingerprint or like a Wi-Fi area network in a very small area. So when they used to congregate in like Tahrir Square, they're able to coordinate, and then the next person carries the next mile over and whatnot. It was also used in Hong Kong to empower some of these activities there. The idea is to work with what you have. In technology, you don't want to shock the existing time that you live in, but you have something that people can adapt slowly while keeping and maintaining a picture of the future vision.
Thank you. Ricky, you have been involved with some interesting applications for telemedicine in India that have reached beyond the cities where there's a developed infrastructure into rural areas. I wonder if you could talk about that and how it might have applicability in Africa.
Absolutely. So my day job in the first company I started was in healthcare technology, and we built one of the leading virtual health platforms in the United States called Health Next. It's everything from long-term living to remote patient monitoring to virtual hospital, EICU, and to a digital front door of a health system. So it's basically a technology health system, if you think about it that way. One of the organizations that I was working with in India is called Good Shepherd India. It's the Anglican Church in India. And they really have a heart for taking care of people in the slums and some of the tribal villages that don't have access to health care. And so I was able to talk to the company, and including Tech Mahindra, and get the technology platform donated for free, where they didn't have to pay the U.S. rates, and we were able to bring, especially during COVID, access to healthcare. And what's interesting is that they will have in these remote areas, we'll figure out how to get them at least connectivity on their device. They'll have a person who can basically do diagnostics in these more rural areas. And we had a network of Christian physicians from the UK to the US that are willing to volunteer and donate their time. You know, it's one thing to go take a missions trip to Haiti or another country, but it's a lot easier if you're like, hey, I can carve out 6 hours this day or take a day on a weekend and serve and treat people. So there's a lot of world-class physicians and clinicians that are willing to do that. And so it was kind of a creative and innovative way to get world-class healthcare to rural areas quickly. Now what we're trying to do is put a business model together where we can actually charge a small fee to make it sustainable and to bring world-class healthcare to the masses. And so, you know, as I think about it, we could very easily do that in Africa if you had willing partners on the ground that wanted to help bring the network together. The technology solution is pretty simple. So that's just an idea of how we can be innovative with what we have and use the body of Christ of people around the world now through technology that maybe couldn't get on a plane and fly somewhere, but can still donate their talents and time.
The whole Health Next solution doesn't require a significant infrastructure on the ground because it's all pretty much cloud-based.
It's in the cloud.
In the cloud. So the solution's coming in the clouds. Amen. Newton, Archie made a comment a while ago about moving from an information-based system to a knowledge-based system, and we were talking earlier about moving from a resource-based system to a knowledge-based system, sort of from farmer to pharma, and being able to leverage technology to address issues. What are the kind of issues you see currently in Africa that technology could address most readily and provide the greatest level of solution for?
mean, you always start with infrastructure if it's not available, so that people can actually build on the top of that. Today, the largest, wealthiest companies in the world, they own no assets. Uber, Amazon, Facebook, all these companies are all about knowledge transfer and inducing movement or motion, if you will. The richest continent on Earth is probably Africa, and the gold is actually the human resources, not the gold in the mountains. If they collectively put their mind together, they can come up with innovative ideas that help Europe and the rest of the world, like they have been, but they've been helping with uranium and gold. This time they'll be able to helping with knowledge and ideas and experiences. Like what Ricky said, a telemedicine platform projected and managed from Africa probably would not be a heavy hard cost at all. There's plenty of good doctors there, and then you can communicate to the rest of the world. We have problems here having access to doctors. I would like, a doctor from Africa to be available to me on the phone 24 hours 7 if I want them to, and not, having to go to the laborious process that we go to here. So ideas like that, it capitalizes on knowledge and education. Most African nations produce better educated mathematicians and scientists than the quality of the students that we have here, sadly. But it's okay. Okay.
Well, it provides a great resource for the kind of adoption that we've been referring to. Archie, speaking about adoption, let's assume you get a phone call or a request for assistance from one of the African nations we've been discussing about how they can adopt a platform such as yours as a national platform. What would the general process be? What would sort of benefits that the nations that adopt a digital banking platform, what benefits would they see?
I think it's funny you say that, because I think the world actually adopted from Africa, from M-Pesa in Kenya. They literally invented mobile payments. China took it from them and had WeChat brought into play. I think adoption would not be a problem, because I think Africa has a very young population. They are all getting educated, and they have access to global information on what's happening. And they have as Newton alluded to, that the biggest asset base is the talent resources that they have. So adoption would not be a problem at all. And from our side, we would be very, very excited to work with local partners. And I think one of my favorite African quotes is that if you think you are too small to make a difference, you haven't spent a night with a mosquito, right? So I think all we need is just stepping up and getting off the couch, and let's make it happen. And I think once you take your first step, it'll have a very snowballing effect. And what you have here is a willing group of people, because one of the God's biggest given gift is willingness to step up and try and have the grit against all odds. And this team here, I'm very privileged to sit next to these wonderful gentlemen here that willing to step up and say, hey, we are ready to help, and give us your lending hand, and together we can make a difference.
I keep thinking of the mustard seed in 2 Corinthians 5:7, where we walk by faith, not by sight. And somehow God brought people like Newton and Archie and RJ and plenty of other people that are just absolutely brilliant minds that are all pieces of the kingdom. And we're here. Let us know how to engage. Newton literally wrote the infrastructure and technology strategy for one of the wealthiest countries in the Middle East. He's here to help because he wants to. We'd love to have dialogue and conversation and whiteboard and bring people together. And we're all ears for suggestions. So we'd love to speak with all of you. Is it question time now, or?
Not quite yet. We've got about 4 minutes. I want to drill a little bit deeper into Archie. Then I have one general question I want to ask that I think is important for motivation. But little bit deeper. You gave us a great view up here, Archie, but if you're a nation looking at national security, looking at taxes and revenue, looking at anti-fraud, how does your platform address that?
I mean, when Ricky talked about geo, India took its national security very important. They wanted to have a local player control its infrastructure because data is very important. Many a times, it seems very attractive to get technology from a foreign nation, and kind of like allow them to have a free hand in, especially on very important data sets. I think which is not a good idea. It's better to have a local partner who enables that ecosystem through a foreign collaboration. So that would be the first step, especially as a financial platform. Data security is very, very important. So I think the national government in any of the African states will have to definitely take that very seriously, because not only that, that data could potentially be misused for other anti-state purposes. So let me give you an example. So when I was speaking at a conference a few years ago, Bell Helicopters reached out to me. They said, in the next 8 to 10 years, we would have autonomous helicopters. So people would be able to make a payment and use these autonomous helicopter. And the reason they reached out to me is that, after the passport, the most important form of identity is your bank ID, because we continuously monitor for AML, PEP, sanctions, OFAC, people who are anti-state actors. So if you want to stop an anti-state actor from using these autonomous vehicles against the interests of the state, the banks have the ability to stop them. So having you control that infrastructure and having technology partners who are willing to help would be the right approach to do it. And also creating a local talent pool to support that innovation would also be the key. So, I mean, especially in the next 20 years, that would be the most important thing. We all talk about cybersecurity. The banking data is a very important source of information. I mean, I know that there are, some of the African nations have kind of given a free rein to other states to come and own that infrastructure. I think it is not a very good move.
I'm just going to throw the last question to you, Ricky. We've talked about what success looks like with technology implementation, with adaptation and financial implementation, but take a minute to talk about what success really looks like from the global perspective in the viewpoint of eternity.
Thanks. Yeah, that to me is really the most important thing. I think back at why we do what we do, and I think of the parable of the talents, and everything we have to multiply for the kingdom. And so for me, a big focus of what I've been focused on has been in India in what I call spiritual entrepreneurship, where we've set aside funding to create companies from within India, where 100% of the proceeds will go to the hands and feet of Christ from within those countries. Instead of continuing to have to get checks, we're going to build sustainable companies. And I'm here to say we want to do that in Africa too. I think that this is all the other companies that I'm involved with and everything. It's to create resources for the kingdom, and so that's really what excites me. The economic opportunities we look at in Africa, many of these may be opportunities where we're not even looking to make proceeds, but we're earmarking funds for the hands and feet of Christ in India. Thanks, RJ.
Great. Thanks, Ricky.
Sorry, in Africa.
In Africa as well. We'd like to open the floor for any questions right now, and you can direct them to any member of the panel or just generally throw them out. We've got about 12 minutes to do that. Would anyone like to ask the first question? Wow, we've covered everything so well. There are no questions. Yes, sir, I see your hand.
So we know we have about a $700 trillion derivatives bubble. What do we do with that when it pops, and how does that affect all the central banks?
That's for you, Archie.
I think right now we are coming out of COVID at the moment, and I think we need funds to stimulate the economy at the moment. And I think we'll have to wait and see. I mean, I'm not an economist to I provide technology as a banking as a platform. We are not in the derivatives market, so I would not be the right person to answer this question. But what this has allowed at the moment to do is access to capital for a lot of innovative technologies, and I think we would see that happening for the next few months, which will have a ripple effect in creating more employment in the technology sector.
We were with one of the top hedge fund managers in New York when we were in Palm Beach, I think on Monday, and it was a similar sort of question. And his answer was, "I've never met an economist that has always predicted things correctly," and he wasn't about to start predicting. I don't have a clue what's going to happen. There's so many unknowns. Let's focus on what we can do and trust in God.
I have a solution. We pray.
If you have a question, if you go ahead and raise your hand, they'll bring a microphone over to you. There's one over here on this side.
I just want to ask, you guys all have fantastic minds and the ability to express. What would you recommend to young college-age students for what classes, what courses of study, what majors? How did you guys get such a pop? I mean, you guys are just amazing to listen to. What would you encourage our students to pursue?
So I thought I wanted to go to medical school. Then I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I'm like, well, let me get a decent business degree. So I chose accounting and got a master's in accounting. Went to one of the big four firms and somehow wound up in healthcare technology, and now I'm in technology. So the most important lessons I got was dealing with people, whether that's taking a leadership position in student government or some sort of club or being an athlete, but dealing with other people, interacting and having challenges. I've always said the people I hire, I look for three characteristics. First and foremost is integrity. There's always going to be gray area in life. Take the most conservative approach. You'll wind up paying for it later if you don't. I look for someone who's well-spoken and an excellent communicator. And then the last, I look for something extraordinary in that person. How did they stand out, whether it's being elite in a musical instrument, some sort of leadership, learning a new language, things like that. I can say, if you probably want to be a doctor, maybe a very different answer. That was more of coming from an entrepreneur's perspective, but maybe Newton and Archie have a different opinion.
Newton?
Up till like 10 or 11 years old, I didn't go to a normal school. I was homeschooled because in first grade, the kids wanted to beat me up because I spelled the wrong word on the board. And ever since, I've been learning by actually tinkering with things. And so linear mathematics will teach you A to B, and that's not creativity. You need something that teaches you creativity so that when you look at anything, you can actually see the solution for it. When I taught any class at the university, the first thing I removed is the grading system. I don't want the person to have acetylcholine. I want to have acetylcholine in their head, not norepinephrine, not adrenaline, and be scared. So pick the kids that actually take classes like that and challenge themselves and creativity without the fear of grade, things like that. So.
Archie?
I think emotional intelligence is more important, complemented with IQ, because I think, as Newton previously has suggested, that human asset is the most important asset in the future. And if you can't spend 5 minutes of your time trying to attract the right talent and convincing why they should come and follow in your dreams, then you're definitely missing something. I would suggest that EQ is the most important aspect that you require. You don't have to be a genius in something. Well, some people are like Newton, right? And some of us are not as gifted as them. But then having the right EQ and ability to work together as a team will definitely make a difference, because that's what I look for in my company. Because if you don't have integrity, and if you cannot respect our differences and work together, then you're not going to be a team player. And that's worked in really good stead for me. And also understanding others' cultures and listening you have different insights to it. So that has always been my guiding principle. And that's allowed me to really attract talented people, way smarter than me in my business. And also, both these two gentlemen, they both invested in me. In fact, Newton wrote one of my early checks when I had my idea on a piece of paper. I just didn't know what he saw. It was just really a piece of paper. And he invested in me, and Ricky's another investor and a close friend. And for me, even investors, when I look at them beyond the money, that wisdom that they can impart, which is more important than the money itself, is more valuable to me. That I can give them a call and have that interaction with them. I'm in trouble. How do I solve this problem? So that emotional intelligence is very, very important as we start going into the next level, which we think, I think we are actually missing out. I have a 5-year-old son who spends more time on his iPad and sending me an iMessage. With Dad, you just have to come across the room and tell me what he wants. And I think we are missing that. And I think if we can do that, that'll be really, really helpful.
I'm going to answer the question combining both of my roles as a bishop and as a businessman. And it's a two-part answer. The first part comes out of Ephesians 2:8 and 9, that we're saved by grace through faith. And I think until you're really saved, until you have a relationship with Christ, you're not even in the position to be able to reach your potential. So I think salvation is first. But the second part of that verse says that he has created us in advance. He's placed gifts in us for good works he has created in advance for us to do. And so once you know Christ, then you begin to identify the gifts that he's put in you and the vision that he's put in you, and you begin to pursue that vision with determination and creativity and a tenacity that will not be held back. And so then it doesn't matter whether you're going over here to the School of Divinity, or over here to the School of Business, or over here to the School of Music, or over here to the School of Nursing. If you're pursuing what God has put in you and you're being the best, whatever it is God created you to be, then you're going to be a success, and you'll see the creativity of the Holy Spirit working in your life. You'll see fulfillment. You'll see the ability to impact others. And then I think the second part of my answer is you have to be able to deal with the failures. As you're trying to stretch and reach into new areas, you are going to fail. And as long as those weren't failures of integrity, you need to be able to do what Paul has said to do, and that is forgetting what lies behind and pressing on to what lies ahead. I stretch forward to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. And I think those two things will propel you forward into what God has created you to be. God didn't create me to be a brilliant, intelligent person that could design Wi-Fi and LAN. But I can't be Newton Howard. I need to be the best me God created me to be, because that's where Christ gets the most glory, because he's the most creative, innovative, unbelievably talented and resourceful individual that any of us will ever know. And he's put that in us, and we reflect his glory. Other questions? We have 4 minutes left. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question, but that was so good, I just thought maybe we should end on that. That was awesome. I just appreciate your minds and how you're thinking. And I just wanted to ask one question, talking about different reviews online with Cogni. Crypto is really starting to make its way into the mindset of people in the world. And I just kind of wanted your opinion on being in this style of banking, how that plays into the future of banking as a whole in the world, because it's starting to dominate even the JP Morgans of the world. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We are not in the crypto business yet. We are an FDIC-insured bank in all 50 states. But in saying that, I'm not going to deny the fact that we are 100% looking at crypto as an asset class, because it used to be an innovation a few years ago. Now it's definitely an asset class. So for us, it is also a very important asset class, because a lot of products and services you can actually consume using crypto assets. But still, we are in a very infant stage. The government regulations would play a very important role on how we integrate those services into the platform. Within our product roadmap, we will be integrating crypto assets in the next 6 to 10 months. It's part of our product roadmap because we do see a massive demand into the market. But end of the day, the regulation dictates everything, and the regulations have been, some countries have taken a little bit of a stronger approach. Here in the United States, there's been a lot more cautious approach to it. Obviously, when Ricky talked about Mayor Suarez, he's been very active in promoting cryptocurrencies in the state of Miami, in the city of Miami. So I think in the next few months, today Coinbase went public today. The asking price was $250, and I think it was trading at about close to $300, almost went to $428, and then dropped back. But it shows that there's a massive interest in cryptocurrencies. And I heard another interesting comment today that Coinbase is not living in the JP Morgan's world. JP Morgan is living in Coinbase's world, which was a kind of epiphany moment when I actually read that statement. So I think in the next few months, I think a lot of regulations are going to be set. And I think platform providers like us, we would definitely enable such services as once we start getting a little bit more clear insight into that reporting structure as well. But that's definitely into our product roadmap.
On behalf of the panel, I want to thank Liberty University, the School of Business, and Dave Bratt for allowing us to come and be part of this presentation. We're available for questions at any point. You can reach us via email. Dave can make those connectivities available. It's been an honor speaking to you this afternoon, and we are grateful for all that God is doing here and in Africa. Thank you very much. Dave?